execution went well, if there was ever such a thing as a good one, a proposition I strongly doubt. Then the execution of Arlen Bitterbuck, Councilor of the Washita Cherokee, that was it. He got his braids wrong, his hands were shaking too badly to make a good job of it, and his eldest daughter, a woman of 30-odd, was out to plait them nice and even. She wanted to weave feathers in the back of the tips, the pin feathers of a hawk, his bird, but I couldn't allow it. They might catch fire and burn. I didn't tell her that, of course. She just said it was against regulations. She made no protest, only bowed her head and put her hands to her temples to show her disappointment and her disapproval. She conducted herself with great dignity, that woman, and by doing so practically guaranteed that her father would do the same. The chief left his cell with no protest or holding back when the time came. Sometimes we had to pry their fingers off the bars. I broke one or two in my time, and I've never forgotten the muffled snapping sound. But the chief wasn't one of those. Thank God. He walked strong up the Green Mile to my office. There he dropped to his knees to pray with Brother Schuster, who had driven down from Heavenly Light Baptist Church in his fiver. Schuster gave the chief a few psalms, and the chief started to cry when Schuster got to the one about lying down beside the still waters. It wasn't bad, though. No hysteria, nothing like that. I had an idea. He was thinking about still water so pure and so cold it felt like it was cutting your mouth every time you drank some. Actually, I like to see them cry a little. It's when they don't that I get worried. A lot of men can't get up to their knees again without help, but the chief did okay in that department. He swayed a little bit at first, like he was lightheaded, and Dean put out a hand to steady him, but Bitterbuck had already found his balance again on his own, so out he went. Almost all the chairs were occupied, with people in them murmuring quietly among themselves like folks do when they're waiting for a wedding or a funeral to get started. That was the only time Bitterbuck faltered. I don't know if it was any one person in particular that bothered him, or all of them altogether, but I could hear a low moaning start up in his throat, and at once the arm I was holding had to drag it in. That hadn't been there before. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Harry Twilliger moving off to cut the chief's retreat if Bitterbuck all at once decided he wanted to go hard. I tightened my grip on his elbow and tapped the inside of his arm with one finger. "Steady, Chief," I said out of the corner of my mouth, not moving my lips. "The only thing most of these people will remember about you is how you go out, so give them something good. Show them how a Washita does it." He glanced at me sideways and gave me a little nod. Then he took one of the braids his daughter had made and kissed it. I looked at Brutal, standing at the parade rest of the chair, resplendent in his best blue uniform, all of the buttons on the tunic polished and gleaming. His hat sitting square John perfect on his big head. I gave him a little nod, and he shot it right back, stepping forward to help Bitterbuck mount the platform if he needed help. Turned out he didn't. It was less than a minute from the time Bitterbuck sat down in the chair for the moment when Brutal called rolled on too. Softly back over his shoulder, the lights dimmed down again, but only a little. You think he wouldn't have noticed and been looking for it. That man Van Hay had pulled the switch some wit had labeled Mabel's hair dryer. There's a low humming from the cap, and Bitterbuck surged forward against the clamps, and the restraining belt across his chest. Over the wall, the prison doctor watched expressionlessly. Thin lips down until his mouth until a single white stitch. There was no flopping or flailing such as old Toot-Toot had done at rehearsal, only that powerful forward surge, as a man may surge forward from straightened up and looked through the mesh. Disorganized, he said, and made a twirling, cranking gesture with one finger. He had heard a few heartbeats from Bitterbuck's chest, probably as meaningless as the final jitters of a decapitated chicken, but it was better not to take chances. You didn't want him suddenly sitting up in the gurney when you had him in the hallway through the tunnel, bawling like he felt like he was on fire. Van Hay rolled on 3, and the chief surged forward again, twisting a little from side to side in the grip of the current. When the doc listened this time, it was over. He nodded. We had once again succeeded in destroying what we could not create. Some of those folks in the audience began talking in low voices again. Most sat with their heads down, looking at the floor as if stunned or ashamed. Harry and Dean came up with the stretcher. It was actually Percy's job to take one end, but he didn't know, and no one else bothered to tell him. The chief, still wearing the black silk hood, was loaded onto it by Brittle and me, and we whisked him through the door, which led into the tunnel as fast as we could manage without actually running. Smoke, too much of it, was rising from the hole in the top of the mask, and there was a horrible stench. "Oh man," Percy cried, his voice wavering. "What's that smell?" "Just get out of my way and stay out of it," Brutal said, shoving past him to get to the wall where there was a mounted fire extinguisher. It was one of the old chemical kind you had to pump. Dean, meanwhile, had stripped off the hood. It wasn't as bad as it could have been. Bitterbuck's left braid was smoldering like a pile of wet leaves. "Never mind that thing," I told Brutal. I didn't want to have to clean off a load of chemical slime off the dead man's face before putting him in the back of the meat wagon. I slapped at the chief's head. Percy stared at me wide-eyed the whole time, until the smoke quit rising. Then we carried the body down 12 wooden steps to the tunnel. Here was at the chilly and dankest dungeon, with the hollow plink-plink sound of dripping water, hanging lights with crude tin shades. They were made in the prison machine shop, showed a brick tube that ran 30 feet underneath the highway. The top was curved and wet. It made me feel like a character in an Edgar Allan Poe story every time I used it. There was a gurney waiting. We loaded Bitterbuck's body onto it, and I made a final check to make sure his hair was out. That one braid was pretty well charred, and I was sorry to see that cunning little bow on the side of his head was now nothing but a blackened lump. Percy slapped the dead man's cheek. The flat sound of smacking his hand made us all jump. Percy looked around at us with a cocky smile on his mouth, eyes glittering. Then he looked back at Bitterbuck again. "Adios, Chief," he said. "Hope hell's hot enough for you." "Don't do that," Brutal said, his voice hollow and declamatory in the dripping tunnel. "He's paid what he owed. He's square with the house again. You keep your hands off of him." "Ah, blow it out," Percy said, but he stepped back uneasily when Brutal moved towards him, shadow rising behind him like the shadow of an ape in the story about Rue Morgan. But instead of grabbing at Percy, Brutal grabbed a hold of the gurney and began pushing Arlen Butterbuck slowly towards the far end of the tunnel, where his last ride was waiting, parked on the soft shoulder of the highway. The gurney's hard rubber wheels moaned on the boards. Its shadow rode the bulging brick wall, waxing and waxing.